October 14th, 1066. A muddy hillside in southern England. William of Normandy watches his left flank collapse. Breton soldiers are running. The English shield wall holds firm at the top of the hill, and Harold Godwinson stands behind it, untouched. William's horse stumbles. For a second, his men think he's dead. Panic spreads through the Norman lines like wildfire. This is it. The invasion is failing. Everything William gambled comes crashing down in this moment. He mortgaged his lands and borrowed from every creditor in Normandy to build this fleet. He convinced thousands of knights to cross the deadliest channel in Europe. He's got no backup plan. No way home if this goes wrong. If his army breaks now, he's just another failed invader. England stays Anglo-Saxon. The English language never gets flooded with French. The entire course of Western civilization pivots on whether William can turn this disaster around. But what if he couldn't? What if Harold's shield wall never broke? What if William the Conqueror became William the Defeated? Quick favor, hit that subscribe button. Now drop a comment. If you were leading an invasion force and things started falling apart, would you retreat or go all in? Stick around till the end. I promise you'll see how one split-second decision didn't just change England. It rewrote the DNA of the entire English-speaking world. William the Bastard. That's what they called him. Born around 1028 in Normandy. The illegitimate son of Duke, Robert, and a tanner's daughter named Herleva. In medieval times, being a bastard wasn't just an insult. It was a death sentence for your political career. But William, he took that label and turned it into fuel. His dad died in 1035 when William was about 7 or 8 years old, and Normandy erupted into chaos. Several of his guardians and protectors were murdered, though the exact number is hard to pin down from medieval sources. Assassins literally snuck into his bedroom. The kid survived by constantly moving, sleeping in different locations, trusting no one. By the time he was 20, he'd fought off rebellion after rebellion and consolidated power through sheer brutality and tactical genius. Here's what made William different from other medieval lords. First, he was absolutely ruthless. When Towser rebelled, he didn't just defeat them, he made examples that kept people awake at night. Second, the guy was a brilliant military strategist who understood combined arms warfare before it was cool. Knights, archers, infantry. He knew how to use them together. Third, and this is crucial, William was patient. He'd wait years for the right moment to strike, then go all in when the opportunity appeared. But there's something else you need to know. William believed he had a legitimate claim to England. King Edward the Confessor allegedly promised him the throne. Harold Godwinson, who's now wearing that crown, supposedly swore an oath to support William's claim. Whether that's true or propaganda doesn't really matter. William believed it. In his mind, Harold was an oath-breaker and a usurper. Now, why does all this matter for today's story? Because the man standing on that battlefield in 1066 isn't some reckless adventurer gambling on glory. He's a survivor who clawed his way to power against impossible odds. He's a tactician who plans everything. And he's a man who believes God himself supports his claim to England. That context changes everything about what happens next. This isn't just another medieval battle. It's the culmination of William's entire life, and he's bet absolutely everything on this one roll of the dice. Let's rewind to 1066. England is in chaos. King Edward the Confessor just died without an heir. In medieval politics, that's like leaving a billion-dollar company with no succession plan, and 5 people claiming they're the rightful CEO, except instead of lawsuits, you get armies. 3 men want the throne. Harold Godwinson, the powerful English earl who basically ran England while Edward was alive. Harold Hardrada, the Viking king of Norway who thinks he has a claim through some ancient treaty nobody can quite remember. And William, Duke of Normandy, who insists Edward promised him the throne years ago. Harold moves first. The moment Edward dies, Harold gets himself crowned. It's a power move. Possession is 9/10 of the law. Even in the 11th century, William, he loses his mind. He swore an oath. William reportedly shouted when he heard the news. Now, here's the thing. William claimed that 2 years earlier, Harold had shipwrecked on Norman territory. William rescued him. then made him swear on holy relics to support William's claim to England. Did this actually happen? We only have Norman sources saying so. Harold's version of events, if he ever gave one, hasn't survived. But whether the oath happened or was Norman propaganda, William believed it, and medieval people took oaths seriously. Breaking one made you an oath breaker, a liar, and basically damned in the eyes of God. William starts preparing for invasion. But here's the thing. Invading England across the English Channel is insane. It's 21 miles of some of the most dangerous water in Europe. Storms, currents, tides. They've killed more sailors than battles ever did. William mortgages lands, borrows extensively, and leverages every favor he's owed to build a fleet. The sources claim anywhere from 600 to nearly 1,000 ships. Most historians settle on around 700 as a reasonable estimate. He recruits knights from across France by promising them English land and titles. He also secures support from Pope Alexander II, who sends a papal banner, though the exact timing and nature of this blessing is somewhat unclear from the sources. Either way, William frames this invasion as religiously sanctioned. Now, it's not just about a crown, it's about punishing an alleged oathbreaker. September 1066. William lands in southern England at Pevensey. No resistance. Harold's up north, dealing with Harold Hardrada, who just invaded with somewhere between 240 and 300 Viking long. Here's where it gets wild. Harold force-marches his army roughly 190 miles north in about 5 to 6 days. An impressive feat of medieval logistics. He catches the Vikings by surprise at Stamford Bridge on September 25th, and absolutely crushes them. Harold Hardrada, the legendary Viking warrior who'd been fighting since he was 15, dies in battle. It's one of the most decisive victories in English history. Harold's celebrating. His men are exhausted but victorious. Then a messenger arrives. William has landed in the south. Harold faces an impossible decision. His army just fought a major battle. They're tired. Many are wounded. The smart move is to wait. Let William sit in his beachhead. Let winter come and force him to leave or starve. But Harold doesn't wait. He force-marches his exhausted army roughly 240 miles south in about 5 to 6 days. Why? Because William's burning English villages, terrorizing civilians, daring Harold to respond. It's a taunt, and Harold takes the bait. October 13th, 1066. Harold's army reaches the hill near Hastings. Later tradition calls it Senlac Hill, though contemporary sources simply call the Battle Hastings. It's good ground, steep slopes, clear views, difficult to assault. Harold forms a shield wall at the top. Contemporary estimates vary wildly, but Harold probably had somewhere between 7,000 and 10,000 men, mostly infantry with axes and spears, locked shields creating a formidable barrier. William has a similar-sized force, but his army is different. He's got heavy cavalry knights on horseback, the medieval equivalent of tanks. He's got archers. He's got infantry. It's a combined arms force, something England hasn't really faced in this configuration before. October 14th, dawn breaks. William addresses his troops. We fight for our right. Harold is an oathbreaker. God is with us. Harold, at the top of his hill, is confident. The shield wall has proven nearly unbeatable against cavalry. Let William's horses run uphill into a wall of spears and axes. Let's see how that works out for him. The battle begins. What actually happened? In real history, the Battle of Hastings is one of the most analyzed military engagements ever. It lasted approximately 9 hours from around 9 a.m. until dusk. 9 hours of brutal, grinding combat. William's cavalry charges uphill. They hit the shield wall. It holds. Horses can't break through locked shields and spears. The knights retreat. Then something interesting happens. William's left flank, Breton soldiers either genuinely breaks or pretends to break. Historians still debate this. They flee downhill. The English right flank sees this and makes a critical mistake. They break formation and chase the retreating. Once you leave the shield wall, you're vulnerable. William's cavalry wheels around and cuts down the pursuing English soldiers. Whether this was a planned feigned retreat or William capitalizing on a genuine rout, We'll never know for certain, but it works. The main shield wall, however, holds Harold still up there, unmoved, watching William's attacks fail repeatedly. Then comes a pivotal moment. William's horse is killed under him. He falls. His men think he's dead. Panic spreads through the Norman lines. William rips off his helmet. "Look at me. I'm alive." According to Norman sources, he mounted another horse. The panic subsides. The attack continues. For hours, it's a grinding stalemate. The shield wall won't break. William tries everything. Cavalry charges, arrow volleys, possibly more feigned retreats to lure the English out. Some tactics work, chipping away at Harold's numbers, but the core of the shield wall remains solid. Late afternoon. According to the most famous account, an arrow strikes Harold, the Bayeux Tapestry. Our most iconic source shows a figure with an arrow near his eye. But here's the thing. Historians debate what actually killed Harold. Some sources suggest he was cut down by Norman knights. Others support the arrow story. The tapestry itself is ambiguous. There are actually two figures labeled Harold in the death scene. What we know for certain is this. Harold died during the battle, probably in the late afternoon. With the king dead, leadership collapses. The shield wall finally breaks. Norman cavalry pours through. The English army disintegrates. By nightfall, Harold is dead. His brothers are dead. And the flower of English nobility lies scattered across that muddy hillside. William wins. He marched to London. On Christmas Day, 1666, he's crowned King of England. But here's our question. What if Harold had survived that critical moment? What if the shield wall never broke? What if William the Conqueror became William the Defeated? Let's rewind to that critical moment. Late afternoon, October 14th, 1066. The fatal blow, whether arrow or sword, never lands. Harold lives. The English king stands behind his shield wall, bloodied and exhausted, but unbroken. He's been commanding this battle for 9 hours. His men are tired. Many are wounded, but they're still there, still holding that hill. William surveys the situation from his position below. The sun's dropping toward the horizon. His men are exhausted. He's already lost hundreds of soldiers. Knights, infantry, archers. His best cavalry charges have failed. The Britons on his left are unreliable, and that shield wall shows no sign of breaking. One of his commanders rides up. "My lord, it's getting dark. We should make camp and try again tomorrow." William knows the brutal truth. There is no tomorrow. Here's the reality of William's situation. His fleet is beached at Pevensey, about 10 to 11 miles behind him. But that's not the real problem. The problem is that Harold's army sits on high ground between William and his only escape route. If William tries to retreat, he has to either fight his way past Harold's fortified position or take a long detour through hostile territory while being pursued. His supply lines barely exist. He's in enemy territory, deep in England, with winter approaching. Every day he sits here. Harold gets reinforcements from across the kingdom. English thanes are already marching from the north, from the Midlands, from the west. William's army can only get smaller through casualties and attrition. Harold's can only get larger. "We attack again," William orders. One more cavalry charge. It's desperate now. The horses thunder uphill through the gathering twilight. The shield wall holds. Norman knights are pulled from their horses and killed. The attack fails. Darkness falls. The battle ends inconclusively. That night, William's camp is a scene of barely controlled chaos. "We need to leave," says William Fitzosborne, one of William's most trusted barons. "This invasion has failed. We've lost too many good men. If we stay, Harold will bring his full army, fresh troops from across England, and destroy us." "We can't leave," counters another baron. "We mortgaged everything to get here. We borrowed from every moneylender in Normandy. We have nothing to go back to. We either win England or die trying." William sits in silence, staring at maps by candlelight. He's gambled everything on this invasion. His reputation as an invincible general, his duchy's wealth, his life, and he's losing. But there's something worse than losing. He's trapped. The geography is damning. Harold holds the high ground on the London road. To reach the ships at Pevensey, William must either Option 1. Break through Harold's position. But he just spent 9 hours trying to do exactly that, and failed. His men are exhausted, demoralized, and outnumbered as Harold's reinforcements arrive. Option 2. March around Harold through the Weald. The Weald is dense forest. Terrible terrain for cavalry, perfect for ambushes. It would take days, during which Harold's light forces could harass them constantly, while Harold's main army repositions. Option 3. Try to negotiate. Offer Harold peace terms. Maybe give up the claim to England in exchange for safe passage back to Normandy? None of these options are good, but option 3 is the only one that doesn't guarantee massive casualties. William sends envoys to Harold that night. Picture the scene. Harold's camp is celebrating. They held the line. The king survived. The invaders are trapped. English soldiers are singing victory songs, already composing poems about the great shield wall that wouldn't break. William's envoys arrive under a flag of truce. Harold receives them in his tent, surrounded by his remaining brothers and thanes. Everyone knows why the Normans are here. The chief envoy bows. King Harold. Duke William wishes to avoid further bloodshed. He proposes terms. Harold's brother Gyrth laughs. Terms? He's trapped. We'll have his head by week's end. But Harold raises a hand. He's been in politics long enough to know when to listen. Speak. Duke William will withdraw his claim to England. He will return to Normandy. In exchange, he asks for safe passage to his ships and an end to hostilities. The tent erupts. Harold's advisors are shouting. No terms. We crush them. Make him grovel, demand tribute. Harold sits quietly, thinking. He could refuse. He could wait for his reinforcements and try to destroy William completely. But there's risk in that. Cornered armies fight desperately. Even if Harold wins, how many more English soldiers die, or many thanes, the backbone of English military power, get killed in the final assault? And there's something else. Harold is a skilled politician. If he lets William leave peacefully, William returns to Normandy in disgrace. A defeated duke, having failed spectacularly. That's almost better than killing him, because it destroys his reputation rather than making him a martyr. Here are my terms, Harold finally says. William withdraws his claim to England. He returns to Normandy immediately. He takes his army and goes. In exchange, I let him leave unharmed. No tribute, the envoy asks, surprised. No tribute, no hostages, no conditions. He just leaves and never comes back. Harold's advisors are confused by the generosity. But Harold understands psychology. This isn't mercy. It's humiliation. William came to conquer England and leaves with nothing. No glory, no wealth, no face-saving compromise. Just complete, total, unambiguous defeat. William accepts the terms. What choice does he have? 3 days later, the Norman army marches back to Pevensey under English escort. They board their ships. Harold's soldiers watch from the shore, jeering, throwing insults. Some throw rocks and refuse at the departing ships. William stands at the stern of his flagship, watching England recede into the distance. He doesn't speak. What is there to say? The Norman invasion of England is over. William sails back to Normandy, not in glory, but in disgrace. November 1066. William arrives back in Normandy. The reception is ... not good. Remember, William borrowed extensively to fund this invasion. He promised his Norman barons English estates. He recruited knights from Brittany Mine and Flanders with promises of land and loot. Now he's returning empty. The creditors arrive first. Where's our money, Duke William? I don't have it. Then we're seizing your properties. Within weeks, William loses several estates to creditors. His financial situation is catastrophic. Then the barons start making noise. William Fitzosborne, Roger of Montgomery, Roger of Beaumont. These men invested their own wealth in the invasion. They lost soldiers. They expected compensation. They got nothing. "You promised us England." Fitzosborne confronts William in his court at Rouen. "England was not mine to give," William responds quietly. "Then return what we invested." "I cannot." The political coalition that supported William starts to fracture. Some barons simply withdraw their support and return to their own lands. Others start plotting, if William can fail so spectacularly, maybe he's not the right duke for Normandy. By early 1067, open rebellion breaks out in western Normandy. William spends the next 2 years fighting to maintain control of his own duchy. He wins. William is still a formidable military commander, but it's costly. Normandy bleeds wealth and soldiers in internal conflicts. Meanwhile, William's enemies abroad sense opportunity. The Count of Anjou starts raiding Norman borders. The King of France, Philip watches with interest. A weak, divided Normandy is no threat to French royal power. But here's where it gets interesting. William's failure doesn't just affect Normandy, it affects the entire political landscape of northern France. In real history, after conquering England, William became one of the most powerful rulers in Europe. The combined wealth of England and Normandy made him stronger than the King of France in practical terms. Other French nobles had to take him seriously. In our timeline, William is weak. He's broke. His reputation is damaged. His barons are unreliable. The balance of power in northern France shifts dramatically. The Count of Anjou, Geoffrey IV, sees an opportunity. In 1068, he invades southern Normandy. William rushes to defend his territory, but he's outnumbered. He loses several towns. By 1070, Anjou controls a significant chunk of what used to be Norman territory. The Duke of Brittany also takes advantage. He seizes border regions that William can't defend. Maine, which had been under Norman influence, breaks away. By 1075, Normandy as a unified duchy barely exists. It's fragmented into competing lordships, with William controlling only the core region around Rouen. The powerful, unified Norman state that William inherited from his father has collapsed. And across the Channel, England is watching all of this with satisfaction. Let's focus on Harold's England for a moment. Harold survived Hastings. He defeated both the Vikings and the Normans in the same year. 1066 becomes England's Annus Mirabilis, Year of Miracles. Songs are composed. Poems are written. The Battle of Hastings becomes legendary. The Great Shield Wall that wouldn't break. Harold is now about 44 years old. We think he was born around 1022, though exact dates are uncertain from the sources. By medieval standards, that's solidly middle. He's got maybe 10 to 15 years left, if he's lucky. The question everyone's asking: what happens after Harold dies? In our timeline, Harold has several sons, but they're young in 1066. His eldest son, Godwin, is in his early 20s at most. Harold also has brothers who survived Gurth and Leofwine. Both lived through our alternate Hastings. Here's the problem. The Anglo-Saxon succession system isn't like Norman primogeniture, where the eldest son automatically inherits. The Witan, the Council of Nobles, chooses the next king, usually from the royal family, but they consider factors like ability, support, and political strength. This creates instability. Harold knows it. His sons will compete with each other and possibly with other claimants after he dies. So Harold does something smart. He starts grooming Godwin as heir apparent. He gives him military commands. He includes him in major political decisions. He makes sure everyone knows Godwin is the next king. But there's another difference from our timeline. Without the Norman Conquest, England's political and cultural development takes a different path. Government Harold doesn't restructure English government the way William did. There's no systematic redistribution of all English land to new Norman lords. The Anglo-Saxon aristocracy remains intact. Power stays more decentralized, based on traditional English institutions like the earldoms and the Witan. This isn't necessarily worse. It's just different. England remains more like a confederation of powerful regions, rather than becoming the centralized kingdom that Norman rule created. Military, Harold learned lessons from Hastings. He saw how effective William's combined cavalry-infantry-archer tactics were. He starts reforming the English military, incorporating more mounted warriors, training archers, building on what he observed. By 1070, English armies look somewhat different from 1066. They're still primarily but they're more flexible, more capable of responding to different threats. Architecture. Here's a visible change. William built hundreds of stone castles across England, the Tower of London, Rochester, Dover, on and on. These Norman castles became iconic features of the English landscape. In our timeline, that doesn't happen. Harold and his successors do build some fortifications, but they're more in the Anglo-Saxon tradition. More burhs, fortified towns, and fewer isolated stone castles. The English countryside looks different. Travel through England in 1100, and you don't see those imposing Norman keeps dominating the landscape. Language. This is huge. In real history, the Norman Conquest flooded English with French vocabulary, legal terms, governmental words, cultural concepts. Thousands of French words entered English between 1066 and 1300. In our timeline, that doesn't happen. Old English continues to evolve naturally, without the massive French influence. By 1200, English sounds very different from our timeline. It's more Germanic, retains more Old English vocabulary, probably sounds closer to Frisian or Low German. Imagine reading Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, except all the French-derived words are replaced with Germanic equivalents. That's roughly what English might sound like by 1400. Culture. The fusion of Norman and Anglo-Saxon cultures that created medieval English culture doesn't occur. England remains more culturally connected to Scandinavia and less influenced by French culture. English art, architecture, literature, it all develops differently. But the biggest change isn't what happens in England. It's what happens to the people who are never born. Here's where alternate history gets truly wild. Without the Norman Conquest, entire royal dynasties cease to exist. Let's trace this out. In real history, William's son, Henry I, marries Matilda of Scotland. Their daughter Matilda marries Geoffrey. Their son becomes Henry II, founding the Plantagenet dynasty. The Plantagenets rule England until 1485, over 300 years. In our timeline, none of this happens. William's sons never become kings of England, because William never conquered England. The Plantagenet dynasty never exists. Who are the Plantagenets? Only the dynasty that produced Henry II, one of England's greatest kings, Richard the Lionheart, legendary crusader, John the King, who was forced to sign Magna Carta, Edward I, Hammer of the Scots, Edward III, who started the 100 Years' War. All of these specific people never exist. Their actions, their decisions, their legacies gone. But wouldn't similar people arise? You might ask. Maybe. Maybe not. That's the chaos theory of history. Each person who doesn't exist means their children don't exist. Each marriage that doesn't happen means different marriages occur, creating entirely different family trees. By 1100, just 34 years after our alternate Hastings, thousands of people who existed in real history have never been born. By 1200, it's hundreds of thousands. By 1300, millions. Every single person in England, France, and Normandy, by 1300, is a different person than in our timeline. Let's jump to 1215. In real history, this is when English barons force King John to sign the Magna Carta at Runnymede, one of the most important documents in the history of constitutional government. Why does it happen? Because John is a terrible king who loses Normandy to France, heavily taxes his barons, ignores traditional rights, and generally pisses everyone off. The barons rebel and forced him to accept limits on royal power. The Magna Carta establishes principles that eventually become rule of law, constitutional monarchy, and individual rights, concepts that shape the modern world. In our timeline, none of this happens. There is no King John, because there are no Plantagenets. The specific pressures that created Magna Carta don't exist. Now, England